welcome you to another live edition of the Sports Box, your go-to sports podcast featuring great content, conversation, and your occasional disagreement. Stick around to interact and ask questions. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports, located on the White Horse Pike in Hamilton, New Jersey. Showcase Sports for the elite players. Ladies and gentlemen, it's showtime.
How is it going, ladies and gentlemen? We are back once again with another episode of Sweet Tea Show on the Sports Box. Took last week off because, quite frankly, there was just literally nothing to talk about last week. And plus, we decided through a mutual decision that, you know what, this Thursday is literally the day before bowl season kicks off. So we're going to do a massive bowl prediction show. We got 13 bowl games we're going to go through real quick for this first show. Going through next Thursday's games will be the ones that we are predicting. It's going to be rapid fire because we got a lot to talk about in this show. Before we get into that, Garth, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm fired up, man. Bowl season. We were just talking about it real quick before we hopped on here. It's become, and we did this last year as well, it's become more of a not really who's playing in the bowl game, but who has the most out of this world, left field, crazy, unorthodox bowl game name. If you're not in the college football playoffs, that's pretty much what you're looking at there. But other than that, just, really fired up to talk some college football. Comment coming in here from Andrew saying today isn't Friday. I know me and Noah have not been religiously on here every single week, but I think by now the word is out that we have switched to Thursday nights. It just works much better for both of our schedules. Makes it much easier to be on here on a consistent basis. But yeah, got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I am fired up to talk some college football. As always, Noah, bowl season is here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Garth says, we are planning Thursday nights, but sometimes something happens, and if we can't do it Thursday, Friday's kind of like our emergency day now. But Fridays at around 8, obviously something happens. We're starting a little later this time because Garth got held up by some idiots in traffic. But that is the scheduled plan, at least Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern time now. I never got that memo. Well, Andrew, this happened 2 months ago, so you haven't been paying much attention, my man.
Dang West Coasters.
I know, right? Henry Zeminoff coming in saying, what's your take on the Broncos' $100 million plans to renovate Empower Field at Mile High? Me personally, I think they should use $100 million of those dollars to help buy out Russell Wilson's contract, but that's just me, I guess.
We actually had some very similar opinions on that one, Noah. My first take was going to be that I had no idea that they were even doing that because I thought everything in regards to the Denver Broncos was finished for this season. Absolutely abysmal season. Russell Wilson has looked washed up all year long, and to make things worse, they failed at tanking because they don't even have a first-round pick, as my good buddy Jacob Winters likes to remind me of every time I kind of throw some jabs at him. And secondly, like Noah said, they probably should either use it to buy out Russell Wilson's contract, or if they are very adamant on keeping him, use it maybe to get him some robotic or prosthetic legs and arms so that he can move and throw the football a hell of a lot better out there on the field.
Yeah, it has been a rough season for Russell Wilson, but in all seriousness, really scary injury for him last Sunday. So hoping it's all right and he can maybe come back and do better. But yeah, Garth is a Chargers fan. Henry, don't take it personally.
Just all in good fun.
New scoreboards are in the works after the season is over. One of them will be the 4th largest in the NFL. New concession stands, some getting revamped. Well, that sounds awesome. The Falcons also have an awesome stadium. Unfortunately, their football team is far from awesome. But real quick before we get any further into it, if you guys are watching and have not yet, make sure to leave a like on the show. Once again, as we always say, this isn't because we're just begging for likes. It actually helps Facebook's algorithm share the show to a larger audience. So if you have not yet, please do that. That would be much appreciated. Tom Scavetta saying clean shaven. Yeah,
Yeah, I got a comment on this one here, Noah.
Yeah.
I would like to say that what Noah is doing is he is getting a fresh slate to get ready to grow out his playoff beard for NHL hockey.
Yeah, that's a fair shot. Granted, we are like 4 months away from the initial plow, so by the time it comes around, I will probably look like a Duck Dynasty extra. But it is what it is, I guess. Josh Burdick saying, "Get with the times, old man." Yeah, Andrew. Look, he's up in his 40s now, and he probably struggles to
He's
get up in
trying.
the morning.
He's trying to give our Mike Aldridge a run for the money for title of old man.
That's true. Back pain, stuff like that. He's probably got it all at this point. Hey, man, I don't want to hear it. We have to stay up until midnight if we want to watch a primetime football game that goes
Yeah,
to
and
like
then wake
overtime
up
or
in the
something.
next morning.
You guys got it lucky with that, so it is what it is. Elevators for ADA guests, they have it all. Speaking of having it all, we have a lot to go over this show for this week. Got a couple topics before we get in our picks. We're also going to review some of our picks from preseason, which, man, they were not the best. But before we get in that, we do have unfortunately, a more serious topic to talk about. Um, you know, this is just unfortunate. I don't even know how to even segue into this, but Mike Leach, former head football coach of the Mississippi State Bulldogs, has unfortunately passed away due to, we now know it was unconfirmed for a while, but we had suspicions that it was related to a heart attack. And Mississippi State came out, I believe, yesterday, in an official quote said it was complications due to a heart problem or something like that. I think was the official wording, something like that. Regardless, heart issue, passed away at the age of 61, Garth. Uh, and this is a guy that's coached for forever. I mean, I know it doesn't feel like it, but he started coaching as a head coach of college football all the way back in, I believe, 2000 for Texas Tech. He was there for around 10 years. Obviously, his highlight there was that Cotton Bowl game in 2008, that team and guys like Graham Harrell, Michael Crabtree, a game that they did end up losing to Ole Miss, but they were 11-2 that year. He won 84 games with Texas Tech, which for a team like Texas Tech, I mean, ask your good buddy Tyrone Wright. That's absolutely insane record. Then he went to Washington State, which, again, another team that has been mediocre for the most part. Had a winning record there at 55-47. Highlight there, 2018 season, they went 11-2. Won the Alamo Bowl, finished ranked number 10 in the nation. And then at Mississippi State, he only coached 3 years, bad 1917 record. They were 8-4 this year. They will be playing in the ReliaQuest Bowl on January 2nd against Illinois. But, it's just really, I don't even know what to say, Garth. This is just a shock. I was not expecting this. It just came out of nowhere. I can't remember ever a scenario where I've been watching a guy coach a college football season or any sport really, and then in mid-season he just passes away so suddenly. It's just tragic. I mean, I obviously I don't know the guy personally, from everything I've seen, really funny, really nice guy. Everyone I've heard come out about him that knew him personally has nothing but positive things to say. Bringing out these funny or hilarious or wholesome stories that they remember from actually knowing the guy. But do you have any thoughts on Mike Leach's passing, Garth, here?
Yeah, obviously when anybody passes away, it's tragic, and words don't really do it justice. But I think to me, what kind of, I don't really know, I wouldn't say worse, but kind of, really tough to swallow, to handle for everybody that knew him, friends and family, players, former, assistants, whatever, is how unexpected it was. It wasn't like he had been battling with health conditions, for a while. We knew that his health was on the decline, nothing like this. It was just a unexpected massive heart attack over the weekend that kind of took everybody by surprise. And nobody was really prepared for this to happen. And I feel so much for everybody that's more affected than myself, like actual family members, close friends, players. I can't even imagine what they're going through right now. Absolute legend of the sport, Hall of Famer in my opinion. Whenever you're kind of coined as like the pioneer of something in a sport, like with Mike Leach, as soon as you say the words air raid offense, boom,
Yep.
Mike Leach comes to mind. He is the pioneer, that guy. For me and you who are a little bit younger, to me personally, he kind of reminds me of like our generation's Steve Spurrier in terms of offense,
Mm-hmm.
because he got a lot of credit for pioneering the fun and gun offense. And Mike Leach took it to another level with the air raid. Um, and then the other, big takeaway I had from this is a lot of people talk about Nick Saban's coaching tree. all his former assistants that have gone on to do great things like Jimbo and Kirby. But Mike Leach, I was absolutely amazed by some of the people that he's had on his staff. Lincoln Riley, Lane Kiffin. There was way more than that. Those are just the two that I remember off the top of my head. But absolutely tragic, man. Huge loss, not only for the sport of college football, but for everybody that knew him personally.
Yeah, no, great coaching tree. I got it up right here. You mentioned Lincoln Riley, a couple other guys, Dave Aranda, current Baylor head coach, Art Briles, former Baylor head coach, was there for quite a while. Sonny Dykes, who is the current head coach at TCU, had a great season this year. Dana Holgerson, former West Virginia head coach, now at Houston, and obviously Lincoln Riley is the main one. He also had a couple of players that played under him that either became college or NFL head coaches. Neil Brown, current head coach at West Virginia. Josh Heupel, Tennessee head coach, pretty big name right there. Cliff Kingsbury, obviously, is another big one. Current head coach of the Cardinals, formerly of Texas Tech. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, the guy was an offensive mastermind, offensive genius. The air raid would not exist, at least how it is currently. I mean, I'm sure eventually someone would have created an offense, right, built around such heavy passing. But the way it exists right now would not exist without Mike Leach. The guy was offensive genius. I mean, it's still weird to talk about him in past tense, but he was an offensive genius. The only, like you said, the Hall of Fame, that'll be a question. I think he's deserving. Of course, I was reading in one of the requirements to get in the College Football Hall of Fame is you have to have won 60% of your career games. And I believe Mike Leach's win percentage was like 59.6%. So I don't know if they'll make an exception. I don't know if they'll change that, but I agree. I don't think you can have College Football Hall of Fame without Mike Leach in it. His significance to sport was just too much. And like you said, his coaching tree was insane. The teams he did it with as well, Garth. Once again, Texas Tech, Washington State, Mississippi State, these are not perennial powerhouse teams where it's expected for you to win 10 or 11 games each year. These are teams that, quite frankly, have been mediocre or probably even worse, I'd say, over the course of their histories. And he had winning records with all three of those teams, especially
three different conferences as well now.
Exactly. I mean, 40 games above 500 for Texas Tech is just ridiculous. So, yeah, very sad news. Always really liked him. Thought he, very outspoken guy, very funny guy. And unfortunately, he's just gone like that. It's just crazy to think, Art, that 2 weeks ago, Mississippi State was celebrating winning the Egg Bowl over Ole Miss, and now now their coach has passed away. I mean, it's just crazy, but it shows, I guess, how sudden it can happen. I don't even want to know what his family is going through right now. I'm sure it's absolutely tragic, but Zach Arnett, their DC, will be the interim head coach for their bowl game. So hopefully they can win that in memory of their former head coach. But but absolutely tragic. Like Tom says, loved Mike Leach, great guy. Brian Attard coming in saying, very sad to hear that news. Not a college football guy, but I knew who he was, and that should say something, to be honest. Yeah, Brian is not a big college football follower, but I mean, it's hard not to know Mike Leach.
Even people who aren't, religiously following the sport of college football still know about who this guy was. Great personality as well. That's something that we didn't really talk about. The personality also made him a very iconic guy, not just the offensive genius that he was.
Yeah, lots of stories coming out. I remember one, I think it was from Lincoln Riley, that he said like 2 days ago, and he was just in the office with Mike Leach doing whatever, and Mike was on the phone talking to somebody for like an hour and a half, and then once he hung up, Lincoln Riley asked him, "Who was that?" And Mike Leach was like, "Oh, it was just a guy that had the wrong number." He talked to a guy that had the wrong number for a friggin' hour and a half, man. That's just insane.
I think it was also Lincoln Riley, maybe, but definitely one of the guys in his coaching tree actually played for him in college, and he sat them down and said, "Hey, look, man, with all due respect, you don't have any chance of like going pro and this being your career, but I want you to come and learn how to be a coach for me." And they said that they were really pissed off, kind of stormed out of his office, but once they collected themselves and calmed down, they took him up on his offer, and it was the best choice that they had ever made.
Yeah, no, I remember that story because it was Lincoln Riley, and the fact that it's such a hot head coaching name, definitely one of the top coaches in college football. He definitely made the right decision there, Lincoln Riley, and Mike Leach put a lot of trust in him because he knew what he was doing. So, very unfortunate. Rest in peace, Mike Leach. Great guy, great coach, in my opinion. Hopefully, he can get in the Hall of Fame. But we'll see what happens. And unfortunately, we have to think about what direction is Mississippi State going to go in the next couple of directions. Are they going to keep running the air raid like they were under Mike Leach that was really starting to be successful? Or are they going to go in a different direction? Who knows? We can discuss that down the line. Until then, rest in peace, Coach Leach. Brian saying, I need to update your background. LOL. Whoops. Yeah, good old Dave Birnbaum is still up in the top right corner. So, I'm sure Brian will be ready to remove that immediately. But moving on to another head coach topic, we have a lot to talk about here. This was just breaking last week, but I'm kind of glad we waited on this one, Guard, because there's more crazy stuff coming out about this Deion Sanders story. Leaving Jackson State to go to the Colorado Buffaloes. We got a lot to talk about in here. Can Deion get the recruits into Colorado, actually make them competitive? Do we think they can compete for the Pac-12 next few years? Because we have to remember, USC and UCLA will not be a factor in the Pac-12 in a couple of years, so that'd be less competition for them to worry about. Obviously, two of the top teams in the Pac-12 this season, and for the last couple seasons, really. Utah has won it back-to-back years, which Garth and I have to take the L on that one. We were not expecting. Well, I think Garth actually picked Utah, but I definitely wasn't expecting them to be able to beat USC twice, and fair play, they were able to do it. But Colorado, a team that's historically not great, just kind of mediocre or below. They've had a couple good seasons here and there. I think a year or two ago, there was one season where they were actually pretty good, but for the most part, it's not been great for them. Typically, teams like Oregon, USC, even Stanford. I mean, not anymore, obviously, but about 10 years ago, Stanford, the top dogs in the Pac-12. Washington had that one season, obviously, where they made the college football playoff. It's been rough going for Colorado, so they need an injection of life into that program. And look, they think Deion Sanders is their guy. He's been great at Jackson State. The recruiting, obviously, Travis Hunter's the main one, number one prospect from last year going to Jackson State. There's a couple others, some five. I think there's another, maybe another 5-star, but definitely a couple 4-stars that went to Jackson State. Solely because Deion Sanders coached there. I mean, plain and simple. So, a couple layers to discard. First of all, what do you think Deion Sanders can do at Colorado? Can he get the recruits in there to build Colorado into something respectable? But more so than this, because you've read more into this to me, what the hell is going on with this Jackson State story? Allocation of funds, embezzlement. I don't know what's going on. I've only read a little bit about it, so you're gonna have to, inform me as well as the viewers on this one. What is the deal with with how Deion Sanders left this program? Why do you think he left? And just what the hell's going on there, man?
Yeah, so obviously, everything's just kind of allegations until it's proven one way or the not. But from what I've read up, what I've seen Deion personally say himself, it was just kind of building frustration with the university and the program. He was really upset with the fact that in his contract it stated that if they reached above, I believe, 60% capacity at home games, he would receive a commission on the ticket sales. And he said, we sold that place out like every single weekend. They were talking about how it was sold out on social media. And, even when College Game Day was there, it was packed. Everybody was really, really excited around that program. And, according to him, he never received anything in form of payments for that. And then when he looked at the actual paperwork side of things, basically it was saying that they were only selling like 30% of the stadium. And he's like, how's that even possible? That stadium was packed. Somebody is lying behind the scenes and probably stealing money from the university, and you guys need to look into it. So there was that. There was another, story that he told about during a football game. Somebody literally broke into the coach's office in the locker room and stole, all like the jewelry and valuable things that he had in there in his office. So I think it was just a combination of a situation that got worse and worse the longer he was there. And secondly, part of me thinks that he just wanted to move on to something else. Maybe he didn't do it as fast as this happened. But eventually, I would like to think that he probably would have moved on at one point or another because, obviously he wanted to do good by the HBCUs. He wanted to kind of do something for them to give back. But eventually he was going to want to move on to a big time gig. None of us saw Colorado coming, but it's just the way that it panned out. And, hopefully it works out there for him. I've seen a lot of behind the scenes stuff, the way he talks to his players, how he talks to media and interviews. Not going to lie, I wasn't a huge fan of his. Like, I didn't root against him. Like, I'm not a hater or anything towards him. I just definitely didn't root really hard or follow him closely. But I've seen a lot more lately. And I got to say, no, I think that there's definitely potential there. I think that he's a really good leader of men. It was my takeaway with a lot of stuff I saw from him.
Yeah, no, I mean, obviously you have to give Deion his due respect. This guy's one of the greatest corners of all time, both college-wise and NFL. He's a guy that can attract talent because, he's a big name. Good old prime. I mean, whatever you want to call him. He has that aura. He has that appeal. He has that marketability, if you will, if that's the right word for it. And he did great at Jackson State. I mean, they were 11-2 last year. They're 12-0 this year. We'll see if they can win that Celebration Bowl. He has announced he will coach that game. He didn't just up and leave. He's going to coach their bowl game and then head to Colorado. As for what he can do with Colorado, look, I think it's an interesting choice because there are positives. Obviously, it's a Power 5 team. I mean, they're in the Pac-12. I think, like I said, once USC and UCLA leave that conference, if it doesn't straight kill the Pac-12 right away, there'll be less competition for him there to worry about. Colorado is a decent team. I mean, it's not like he's just going to some nobody, like some 2-win Sun Belt team or anything like that. It's a decent starting point for an FBS career. I mean, you couldn't expect, him as an FCS coach to all of a sudden just up and leave to some top 25 team or whatever. You have to start somewhere. So I think this is a solid starting job for him. The question for me is, like I said, a lot of those recruits that went to Jackson State solely because Deion Sanders was there. Can he convince those guys to transfer to Colorado? Kind of like when Lincoln Riley left Oklahoma and about half of friggin' Oklahoma's coaching staff and multiple players on that roster wanted to transfer to USC. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But
I think he'll do decent, Noah, in the recruiting side of things, like actually putting together a competitive roster. My question mark for him will be, in the actual X and O's side of things, because, I think that's where the biggest step up comes. He's going to be going against head coaches that are a lot more experienced, a lot more proven. They're really good actually at in-game adjustments and game planning and stuff like that. It's going to be total night and day difference from what he was up against at Jackson State.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's one thing to be a great recruiter, right? But you still have to have that X's and O's mentality. And look, maybe he defers a lot of that. Maybe he can get some good coordinators in there and help defer some of that. But, I mean, obviously he knows what he's talking about defensively. Whether he knows how to coach a defensive line or linebackers or anything like that. But, definitely knows he could coach up the secondary. But, I definitely think he's a guy that I could see as he needs a good offensive coordinator to get in there. And, stick to that side of the ball. Let him worry about man management and, motivating the defense, stuff like that. I definitely agree. I don't see him as that kind of guy that is just going to be able to control everything all by himself. I think he'll be a great motivator and whatnot, but, he could potentially need, some help from the coordinators. But, if he can get some transfers in from Jackson State, obviously Travis Hunter's the main one. Another one I've heard mentioned a lot, Garth, and I mean, Deion has basically said himself, his son, the quarterback at Jackson State, Shadur Sanders. My apologies if I mispronounced that. I don't really keep up with the FCS. But Sanders Jr., we'll call him. For the last 2 seasons, Garth has been starting for Jackson State. He's completed 68% of his passes, over 6,600 passing yards, and 66 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. He's not really mobile, but he has scored 8 rushing touchdowns the past 2 years. So, I mean, this is a guy that, at least at an FCS level, very productive. Granted, he's probably on the best team in the FCS, at least right now, in that division. They went undefeated this year, so there's not really much you can say about that. And like you said, I mean, FBS is a big step up. It's a Power 5 conference. We'll see what happens. I mean, I wish him the best. I've always liked Deion. I think he's a great personality, solid guy. But it is a big step up. So we'll see what he can do. Andrew's saying about Colorado, they've had one good season in the Pac-12. There's other good teams. The Pac-12 will be fine. Yeah, there's other good quality teams. But the thing is, Andrew, when I'm looking at it and thinking about the future of the Pac-12, you have to consider, first of all, the Pac-12 as it is before USC and UCLA even leave. It's already the lowest earning Power 5 conference, and it's not even close. Then you're losing two of your, definitely USC. I mean, UCLA a little bit, but USC is the big moneymaker in that conference. They're leaving as well. There comes a point, and I know other teams will join the Pac-12, blah, 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 but there comes a point where someone's going to look at it financially and either think they have to make big changes or they have to scrap it all together. Now, I'm not saying I think the Pac-12 will go away right away, but I think they're going to have to do something drastic. I do not think they're going to be able to survive long without the Los Angeles teams. I hope I'm wrong on that. I've always liked the Pac-12 when I can watch the freaking games and they're not airing at midnight.
I know that. I think that's one thing, honestly, that does make their their revenue, at least from the TV standpoint, a little bit harder because a lot of those good games kick off at like 10 Eastern.
Yeah, like it's an exciting conference. Like I never said, oh, I hate watching Pac-12 football. It's fun to watch. But the problem is the market sucks. The TV coverage is terrible. I mean, if you want to stay up until midnight and watch a game, credit to you. I usually just stick with the scores when I'm talking Pac-12 football because, and look, I hate it. I'm not saying I dislike watching Pac-12. It's one of my favorite conferences to watch. Very exciting, typically very high scoring. But man, it's just a struggle to watch some of these games. It's not like friggin' SEC or Big 10, Big 12, where you have these great noon games, 3:30, what have you. Even the ACC, it's just and I get it. They're on the West Coast. I understand why it is the way it is, but still, I mean, it's just tough sometimes. So we'll see what happens with that. But moving on from Deion Sanders talk, we're gonna real quick before we get into our no huddle picks for the evening. We're gonna review some of our picks from preseason. And
Oh God,
can't,
this
can't
will
really
be good.
yeah, I can't really sugarcoat it here, Garth. We have to take when we get it right, we deserve the praise, but when we get it so horrifically wrong, like we did on some of these
I,
predictions,
I already know my biggest win and my biggest loss.
yeah.
Overall, how I did, no idea, but biggest win, biggest loss for sure. I know off the top of
Well,
my head.
well, you know what? We'll go ahead and start off with you then, since you gave us that nice little segue. We will start with our conference championship predictions from preseason. We each picked all 10 conference champions, both Power 5 and Group 5 conferences. And this also counts into our picks records. So I added these up and added them. So our picks record is now fully updated from all the games and now the conferences and playoff teams you picked. But Garth, we will start with you on this one. You had a 2-8 record predicting the
Oh my
conference
God.
champions. Yeah, this should show you how this segment's going to go. Your correct picks were UTSA. They did win the Conference USA. And you also predicted Utah would win the Pac-12. Other ones, App State did not even make the championship game. Northern Illinois, I don't think, made the championship game. Boise State did not make the championship game. UCF did make the championship game, but they lost, got absolutely
Tulane.
boat raced by my uncle's Tulane Green Wave. Congratulations to them. NC State did not make the championship game, as neither did Baylor or Ohio State or Alabama. 2-8 record, Garth. What do you have to say about that, my friend?
Yeah, so as I said, I knew my biggest win and my biggest loss. My biggest win was definitely predicting Utah. My biggest loss was having, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, my Florida Gators finishing second in the SEC East. But other than that, Noah, just a really weird year of college football, and not in a bad way. I think a lot of teams that we expected to be really good underachieved, and a lot of teams that we expected to kind of maybe be like middle of the pack overachieved, like LSU, first year under Brian Kelly making the SEC championship game, and Alabama, struggling mightily during the course of the season. So just a really weird year of college football. NC State major letdown. Devin Leary went down to injury. Um, you know, tough go of it for these picks, that's for sure.
Andrew saying Pac-12. Boise State did make the championship game. That's right. And you know why I accidentally said they didn't? Because I was thinking of your overrated San Diego State Aztecs who went 7-5 and completely missed the championship game. The MWC championship was Boise State versus Fresno State. That's right. We're going to get into Fresno State in a little bit. They have a pretty decent bowl game, actually. One of the better matchups of the early slate. Adam Zucker joining the show. How are you doing tonight? Didn't Deion ask for his son to start at quarterback? Yes, he did. We mentioned that probably
Yeah,
before you
I don't
joined the
know
show,
if
Adam.
ask is really the right word though, because he's the head football coach. Like if he wants his son to start, he's going to start. Granted, he might
Yeah.
get backlash if he doesn't play good, but I don't think
Right.
he has to like ask for permission for his son to start.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's his decision. We'll see if, how well he does. Is Alabama any good this year? I think Alabama is still a very good team, but obviously they're not as good as they could be. I mean, this is a team that's won God knows how many titles under Nick Saban. I believe it's 6 because he won one with LSU. He has 7 total.
What? So what's crazy about Alabama, Noah, is very up and down season. A lot of games where they either lost in heartbreak fashion or just barely scraped by with a win. And everybody, as always, whenever Alabama has a little bit of struggle, granted, me and you are never on this train, but there is people out there that are like, hey, maybe Nick Saban's washed, maybe Alabama's dynasty is finally over, blah, 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 blah. What does Nick Saban do? He goes out and currently has the number 1 recruiting class in the nation easily. He's got like 20 points higher than your Georgia Bulldogs in second. And then behind those two, it's not even close. And he's also favored to land 2 5-star defensive lineman teammates that are both ranked within the top 20 players in the nation in this year's class. So, hey, down year for Alabama. But they're loading that talent right back up in this year's class.
Yeah, no, I mean, he's always going to get those classes in. The question is, can they put the results together like they have in the past? I mean, let's not have any recency bias either. This is a team that 11 months ago was in a championship game against Georgia. Unfortunately, they did get absolutely boat raced in that fourth quarter and lose that game. But, I mean, it was a competitive game before that. Do I think they're going anywhere? Absolutely not. I still think they'll be contending in the West and probably for the playoffs until Nick Saban retires. I think once he retires, they'll probably kind of reset. They'll have to see who they can get in there. But as long as he's in there, I'm not counting them out. I mean, look, their down season is what? They still went 10-2 in the regular season, and they're
Right.
both their losses. One of their losses was on a 2-point conversion in LSU, and the other one was a last-minute field goal by Tennessee. Now, I will say
only
they
the
had
first or second time they missed playoffs as well.
Exactly. And I will say they did have some scare games. Yes, I understand. But like Garth said earlier when we were going over these conference championship games, a really unpredictable year. Like, I got to say, these last 2 years of doing Sweet Tea, I mean, the first one was a bit boring because, it was just Alabama just basically steamrolling everyone. The last 2 years, man, we've been covering have just been absolutely unpredictable and insane. And I've been loving it so far. I mean, the playoff 4, I think, is incredible as well. And definitely one we didn't predict because we're going to get that in a minute, man. We just screwed the pooch on our playoff predictions. Andrew saying San Diego State needs an actual offensive scheme. We're so scared to throw the ball. But, can't just roast Garth. I have to put up my terrible predictions as well. They really weren't much better. I went 3-7. I said Louisiana would win the Sun Belt. They didn't even make the championship game. Troy beat, I believe it was Coastal Carolina for the Sun Belt.
Exactly. Who saw Troy having? They were like a one-loss team this year.
Yeah, credit to them, and we'll get into them a little bit for our bowl predictions. UTSA, one of the ones I got right. They won the Conference USA. Let's go Roadrunners, baby. Northern Illinois, not even close. They went, dude, Garth, I swear to God, I looked it up. I think they went something like 3-9, and we predicted them to win their conference. Come on. San Diego State, Andrew's boys, they did not have a conference championship winning season, although they did go 7-5. Houston, respectable pick, just didn't quite work out. Utah, I did get correct. Clemson, I got correct. Oklahoma, I mean, there's just not much to say about that. That's literally the biggest L I've ever taken on this show, saying Oklahoma would win the Big 12. They're one of the most embarrassing teams of the entire season. I still think Brent Venables was a great hire. He's going to rebuild that program back. But for me to pick them to win their conference year one of a new coach, just a big fat steaming out. Granted, I understand no one expected TCU to come out But Oklahoma wasn't even close. They went like 500. It was absolutely embarrassing. Ohio State, not that bad a miss. I mean, their only loss was to Michigan, obviously, who ended up winning the Big Ten. And Ohio State still made the playoffs at number 4. But, yeah, they did not do it. And Alabama weren't even in the championship game. So, got to take an L there, and got to take an L on this as well, Garth. Our playoff teams, we actually, funnily enough, had the exact same playoffs in the exact same order, by the way. Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama. We went 2-2 on that one. We got Georgia and Ohio State, who will be playing each other in the playoffs, by the way. But Alabama, nope, and Clemson weren't even really close to the playoffs at the end of the season. So, yeah, Garth, do you have anything to say about our playoff predictions here?
I think that both Clemson and, well, actually throw Alabama in the bunch too. I think Georgia ended up being exactly what we predicted them to be this year. Clemson, Ohio State, and Alabama let us down majorly. More specifically, Clemson and Alabama, because like you said, Ohio State was right there. They just had the one loss to Michigan. So it wasn't like they had just a complete down year where they sucked. But yeah, I think Alabama is probably the biggest letdown of the season, even though they had the 2 losses, a lot of close games, a lot of very up and down roller coaster type year for them. And they hurt our picks big time. We're going to be looking for a bounce back, Nick Saban. You gotta make this one up to us, buddy.
I don't know about that. I hope they lose 4 games next year. But I definitely don't. I definitely expect a decent bounce back from them. We'll see what happens, though. Hey, look, I said this to you a few weeks ago, Garth. I don't think it's a coincidence that the first 2 years of NIL, Alabama's missed the playoffs, lost the championship game, and Clemson's missed both times. The 2 most dominant teams of the BCS era, or at least or not the BCS era, the college football playoff era before NIL. And a 25% rate of those teams making the playoffs. I mean, we'll see if it continues, but I definitely think it's going to be a lot more competitive in the next few years as NIL continues to get stronger. But regardless, we just want to laugh at our picks for a little bit before we get it. You know what the sensible situation is, Garth? After you make some terrible picks, it's time to make some more picks. So we're going to pick the first 13 bowl games, like we said earlier. It's time for our no huddle pick segment. And like it says on the show, in the description, I posted a graphic on my Facebook area as well. It's the BOWL MANIA special. Capital One does this BOWL MANIA pick'em thing on ESPN. It's basically like NFL pick'em, whatever you want to call it. You can pick the games outright. You can pick against the spread. You can do some other option. I don't even remember what the hell it is, but basically pick every single bowl game. We didn't do this last year. This is something, last year we mainly just covered the main bowl games. But this year, we're going to try and do every single one. So we'll see what happens. We'll give you a quick standings recap of the picks record. Garth went 5-1 last week. His only L was TCU, which everyone got wrong on the show last week. Even our guest, Uncle Derek, got that one wrong. But he did correctly pick Utah, which is the only pick that we disagreed on. I picked USC, which is why I'm 4-2. So I lost a game to him, but I did gain one back on our terrible conference championship picks. So we're basically even. I'm still about 4 games back or whatever it is. So got 13 games here. We're going to get into predict them. Hopefully I can make some ground up. And we're also going to get into laughing at some of these hilarious bowl names. So we will start with this one, Garth. The Hometown Lenders Bahamas Bowl. Featuring the Miami of Ohio Redhawks, who are 6-6, going up against the UAB Blazers, who are also 6-6. UAB are minus 10.5 favorites, over under 45. And some interesting names in this game, Garth. One guy I would definitely point out real quick, running back Dwayne McBride, was expected to play this game, but unfortunately because of an injury, is now out. This is a shame because this is a guy on the season, Garth, that had 1,700 yards rushing and 19 touchdowns. And so he is now out of this game for them, but they're still expected to win. Trey Shropshire is their leading receiver with over 700 yards receiving and 5 touchdowns on the year. Looking at the team stats, UAB is a team that scores over 30 points per game. Defenses are about equal, both allowing 22, 23 points per game. But Miami's offense only scores 20 points per game, a little over 300 yards of offense per game, whereas UAB is averaging 442. I'll go ahead and start here on this one, Garth. I got UAB winning this one. Good old University of Alabama, Birmingham. alma mater, a former Atlanta Falcons superstar wide receiver, Roddy White. Fun fact for you there. But I'll go ahead and pick UAB in this one. What about you, Garth?
Yeah, so I'm going to be quite honest here, guys. I don't know much about either one of these teams.
Mm-hmm.
My pick is going to come down to this weird bit of logic. Immediately, I thought to myself, which one of these mascots would win in a fight, a Red Hawk or a dragon breathing fire?
Yes.
And I think that it's pretty safe to say that a dragon breathing fire would beat a hawk any day of the week. And you listed off some stats there that only reinforced my pick. I'm going to go with the UAB Blazers. I don't think either one of these teams plays defense particularly well, but in terms of offense, the Blazers are a much more high-powered team that can score a lot more points.
Well, there you go, guys. That is the hard-hitting sports analysis that you guys come to see every Friday night. Or every Thursday night now. Garth and I both going UAB on that one for a little bit of different reasons, but it is what it is. Some of these bowl games, because there's about friggin' 50 of them, you got to kind of just flip a coin pretty much. But the next one, well, first of all, we got a comment here. That sounds like a great vacation in the Bahamas Bowl. Yeah, man, that does sound really good. Those teams will definitely be enjoying it. But moving on to the next bowl game, Garth, we have the Duluth Trading Cure Bowl. This is actually one of the better
This is a
matchups,
good
Garth.
matchup.
Two conference champions. UTSA, like I said, did win the Conference USA. Troy won the Sun Belt. Both teams are near the lower 25 of the rankings. UTSA is a very slight favorite at a -1, over under a 56.0. Matchup predictor has a 56.3% chance of UTSA winning this game. UTSA is led by, get this, Garth, because people want to roast Stetson Bennett, sixth year quarterback Frank Harris, who announced he is coming back for a seventh year next season. I don't even know how the hell that works, but yeah, he is a senior, and he had 31 passing touchdowns this year, along with 3,800 yards. His picture on ESPN's site is very weird, by the way. His eyes are completely closed, and he has some of the biggest teeth I've ever seen. I'm gonna have to send it to you after the show, Garth. It is hilarious. But anyway, he's a very good quarterback. On the other side, Troy's quarterback Watson, Mr. Gunnar Watson, has 13 touchdowns and 10 interceptions on the year. Troy is more of a running team. They have a running back with over 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns. Receiving wise for UTSA, keep an eye on Zachary Franklin, had 86 catches for 1,100 yards and 14 touchdowns this season. Offensive wise, UTSA absolutely lights it up in the Conference USA. They're averaging 38.7 points per game, but obviously in that conference there's not a lot of defense, so they're also giving up 26.5 points per game and over 400 yards per game. On the other side for Troy, they're averaging 26 points per game, almost 400 yards per game, and only give up about 17.5 points per game in this one. Garth, I think it's a really close matchup. Definitely one of the better matchups early in the bowl season. I mean, in fact, it's only the second bowl of the year, and the season, and you have, two ranked teams in this one. I think it's very close. I think Troy definitely overachieved. I think UTSA kind of did what we expected them to do. Definitely a Conference USA favorite in preseason. But I just think Frank Harris, he's a very good quarterback. Even though he's really got to learn how to take a better pitcher than that. Come on, man, step it up. They're very high scoring. They're great at passing. Their running game is solid. They just kind of do everything well. Troy, I think, is a bit harder to say because, I think their defense has been good for the Sun Belt. How is it going to do against this high-flying UTSA offense? I'm not so sure. So I'm going to pick UTSA to win this one, probably a shootout. I think this could be something like, I think that 56 over-under is going to get annihilated. I think it could be something like a 42-30 type of game. But I'm going to pick the Roadrunners in this one, Garth. What about you?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a really good matchup. I think both of these teams are very evenly matched. Complete toss-up. This game could very easily go either way here. I'm very torn on this one, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think what my gut is telling me is to go with Detroit Trojans here, just because this is kind of like a really special, once-in-a-lifetime type of season for them. This is a team that's used to being like a doormat of the Sun Belt, just losing season or barely 500, nothing like what they've done this year. And they've beaten, granted the Sun Belt is probably one of the weakest conferences in the nation, but, I think teams like Appalachian State are honestly pretty good football teams, and they were able to beat them this year. I think that their offense isn't quite as high powered as
Mm-hmm.
UTSA, but their defense is really solid. Um, it will be tested, but I think they can. I think they can pull this off and just barely win like a 3-point game. Should go right to the wire. Going to go with the Troy Trojans here.
So Garth and I differ on that one. He goes with Troy. I go with UTSA. A couple more comments come in. Mike
There he
Aldridge
is.
saying Andrew in here talking to himself. Well, Mike, you're the expert on that in some of our group chats. You send like 10 messages in a row when no one's
Also,
in
Mike,
there.
the Lightning did just score. I missed who it was, but they go up 2-1 with 8 minutes to play. If you could comment who
Fantastic.
that was, that would be greatly appreciated.
Mike Aldridge with the woo as well. Always great to have Mike in here. One of our biggest fans for sure. Now that he's back on Facebook. Not every time, Andrew. Maybe when you're in here, sure. But we've had a lot of shows where comments blow up with lots of different people. So, I mean, we've been killing it tonight. Comments have been blowing up. 11 reactions already so far. If you guys have not yet, make sure to leave a like on the show because it helps spread our show around. But moving on to the next bowl game, Garth, we have, hang on, let me get it up here first. Oh my God, this is a doozy here, Garth. We have the Wasabi Fenway Bowl between the Cincinnati Bearcats and the Louisville Cardinals. Cincinnati went 9-3 on the year, whereas Louisville went 7-5. Louisville is a slight 2-point favorite in this game, Garth, and the matchup predictor says 55.4% chance of a Louisville win in this one. Over under of 40 in this one. I think this is a great quarterback matchup. I think Malik Cunningham, really solid dual threat. And the other side, look, we thought Desmond Ridder leaving, maybe Cincinnati would take a step back offensively, but Ben Bryant's come in this season, Guard, 3-1 touchdown ratio, 2,700 yards passing. He's done a really solid job. Running wise, McClellan has been really good for them this year. 834 yards, about 6 yards a carry, 7 touchdowns as well. Stats wise, 31 points per game for the Cincinnati offense. On the defensive side, they've done pretty well, actually. 20 points allowed per game and only 328 yards allowed per game, which is pretty solid. Obviously, this is a team, Guard, that is about to move to the Big 12, so we'll see what they can do against the better competition there. On the other side for Louisville, they average 27 points per game, over 400 yards of offense per game as well. This is a very even matchup, in my opinion. So, Garth, I will let you start with this one because I'm a little torn. I want to hear some of your thoughts on this one. Who do you think can win this game?
Yeah, like you said, no, this is a really tough one for me to pick, honestly. I think that Cincinnati is probably the more well-rounded team. They play both sides of the football really well. They don't make a lot of mistakes. This is a really good, disciplined team that's been built up over the past few seasons by Luke Fickell. On the other side of things, Louisville, they've got one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in the nation in Malik Cunningham. Can throw the ball, really explosive runner. He's one of those players, especially in the conference that he plays for, that's very capable of just going completely nuts and taking over a football game for his team. Defense leaves a lot to be desired. This is not a good defense by any means. But the good news for them is they're fully capable of winning a shootout type of game. And, with the offense that they have, Malik Cunningham, as I mentioned, I'm so torn on this game. I think that I'm going to give a slight edge to Cincinnati just because, like I said, I think they're a more well-rounded team. I also think that they're kind of what they can do to get Louisville out off of their game is they can kind of pound the ball, control the clock, kind of play the keep away game, if you will. And also, too, I could be wrong, but I do believe that Louisville has quite a few transfer players that won't be playing in this game. So that could potentially be a factor as well. I like Cincinnati in a close one, though, because I do think that Malik Cunningham has a big game to help Louisville make it, close. Probably like a one-score game, 7 points, maybe 10 points, but should be a good one.
Well, just to disagree because I need to make up ground, I'm going to pick Louisville because, like you said, I think it's a very close game, very even game. Probably like a field goal, maybe a touchdown type of game in this one. I mean, I think that -2 is definitely a fair representation of this game. But, yeah. Mike saying I knew you'd say that. Well, I mean, it's just the facts, Mike. I'm sorry, buddy. The
Mike,
Pac-12 choked in. Yep.
Mike let me down by not telling me that Braden Point scored the go-ahead goal. What happens? Brandon Hagel goes out and scores another goal. Lightning winning 3-1 now. Man, third periods, though, this team just goes nuts and scores like 3 or 4 goals every third period. But enough of that. I'm just fired up. Mike, I hope you're fired up as well, buddy.
Well, the Leafs are still losing the Rangers with 4.5 minutes to go in that game, so maybe an opportunity for you guys to pick up some ground there. Mike saying the Pac-12 choked again, man. I just don't get it. It's not the conference choking. It's a very competitive conference. The teams in the conference, same thing. It's not like other conferences who have one powerhouse team that steamrolls
Whoa,
everybody.
whoa. I
Yeah.
just want to let you know one thing, Andrew. Year one, Billy Napier, Pac-12 champion.
Oh, here we go with this bullshit again. All right. Moving on from this game, and speaking of Billy Napier and his absolute fraud self, going 6-6 with the Florida Gators in his first season, he will be. This is how far
This was
Florida
a
has
weird
fallen away
matchup. No, honestly, not gonna.
from national champions Tim Tebow and all that Heisman winners to now playing in the SRS Distribution Las Vegas Bowl. The 6-6 Florida Gators will face the number 14 Oregon State Beavers from the Pac-12 conference. There you go, Andrew, who were 9-3 on the year. Very solid season for them, ranked at number 14. Matchup predictor has 57.1% chance of Oregon winning this game, which is about 43% too low, in my opinion. Anthony Richardson will not be playing in this game, I believe, Garth. I think they're starting Jack Miller, if I remember right, the
That is
Ohio State transfer. So we'll see what he can do. Look, let's not waste much time on this, Garth. Oregon State 45, Florida 10. I mean, they just have absolutely nothing here. When your leading receiver, Garth, is a pasty-ass white guy named Ricky Pershaw, I mean,
pretty Ricky.
that just tells you.
Ask Mike Aldridge about him. That guy torched him.
Yeah, that's true. Granted, everyone torched Florida State in that game because that was a high-scoring, wild game. But yeah, Florida has nothing, man. I mean, they've been finished all year, 6-6 record. Look, Garth, they lost to Vanderbilt, and this isn't the Vanderbilt we're talking about in my NCAA dynasty, coached by Sean Dawkins with the visor covering his eyes. That's actually a competitive team. This is the Vanderbilt that lost like 26 straight SEC games before Kentucky completely choked against them, man.
So with that said, Noah, how does that reflect on Andrew's take of the Pac-12 being like a powerhouse conference and a struggling SEC program like Florida was able to beat their conference champion?
That's true. They did beat Utah on an incredible game-winning drive by Anthony Richardson, and then Cam Rising threw a friggin' interception. Oh, man. Don't get me started, man. I had Utah in that game, and I had to hear about it for like 3 months. But anyway, this -10 spread is a joke. It should be about -100. Florida's defense is terrible. They're giving up 29 points per game, 416 yards against on defense. And look, in all seriousness, Florida has had a ton of their players opt out of this game, basically. Oregon State's a respectable team. I don't think they'll pull a Utah, but hell, you never know, I guess. Picking Oregon State to win this one. What about you, Garth? I want to hear your detailed thoughts on this game for your Florida Gators.
So first and foremost, I don't even understand how this bowl game happens in the first place. Oregon State is on, I believe, a 5 or 6 game winning streak. They're ranked almost within the top 10. Florida obviously not ranked at all. They have one of the best defenses in all of college football. They don't let up a lot of points, a lot of yards, very experienced bunch there. So, I kind of scratched my head when I saw this in the first place. Then we have to travel out to the West Coast there in Vegas. This is a game by no means that we should win if I'm being a realistic, unbiased Florida Gator fan. Like you said, we've had a lot of key players opt out of the bowl, especially on the defensive side of things. So that's a unit that struggled this year that loses a lot of key pieces, especially Ventrell Miller, who opted out to go and prepare for the NFL. He is kind of the heart and soul of our defense, the one guy who played phenomenal all year on that side of the ball. So I don't see how the defense does much of anything in this game. As you said, Anthony Richardson, he won't be playing because he's also going to the NFL. Jack Miller's first career start. He was a backup at Ohio State before transferring to us. No idea how that's going to go. Have not seen anything, to try and form an opinion on how he might play. I will say the only thing that we do have going for us in this game is even the older offensive linemen that are going to the NFL are going to be playing. They decided to stick around and play in this bowl game. And both of our starting running backs will be playing as well. So, at least we should, in theory, be able to run the football. I want to say Florida wins this game with everything in me. I still hope that they do. It would be kind of a good momentum builder headed into next season to beat a really, really good Oregon State football team. But with that said, being unbiased, Noah, just looking at the facts, the stats, which team on paper is better than the other, I don't see how Oregon State loses this game unless they just come in and play like abysmal, make a lot of mistakes. So I think Oregon State wins this one. Hopefully we can keep it close and at least make it like a good, enjoyable game to watch. But yeah, Oregon State.
Yeah, they're not going to keep it close. They're going to get absolutely boat raced in this one. Andrew says non-biased, Garth. Hey, he did pick
I
Oregon
gave a
State.
really non-biased take.
These guys are still going on about the Pac-12. It was a 6-team race until the end. That's why expanded playoffs were necessary at the beginning of the season. Mike saying, I agree, but the conference had as good of a chance as ever in their playoff drought. They usually don't go in the final weeks with a shot at making it. Guys, contrary to popular belief, this is the bowl prediction show, not the Pac-12 debate show. We are talking about Pac-12 teams here tonight in some of these bowl games, but
I know we're gonna have to. Andrew, you better make an appearance on the preseason prediction show next year to talk up the Pac-12 as fired up as you've been.
Proud of you, Garth. Yeah, I am too. I honestly thought he'd pick Florida, so there you go.
Hold on a second here, guys. I would like to take this time to say that me and Noah are very good at eating our crow when it's due, and also pointing out when we're right. Unlike some other people, in particular, people who were very against Zion Williamson coming out of college and still to this day refuse to eat their crow. But thank you, Andrew.
2024, we finally get what we've been waiting for. Absolutely, playoff expansion. Can't wait. Maybe they return the video game. Yeah, it got delayed, and I told Garth, man, I can't wait anymore. I had to bust out NCAA 14 with my Sean Dawkins Vanderbilt dynasty baby, 6-4 on the season. So
Mike Aldridge, Brandon Hagel scores again, second goal of the night. Lightning leading 4-1, 2.5 minutes to go, buddy. We are now 14-3 in our last 17 games.
Awesome. Invite me then. Hey, we will. You're always welcome on the show if you want to come on, Andrew. Man. FSU 52, Oklahoma 10. Well, Mike, hey, this is actually good, Mike. We're not covering FSU tonight because they actually have a decent bowl game. They're not one of the earliest games.
A decent bowl game.
There comes the FSU hate from Garth. There's a prediction. Moving on to the next game. Another team from the Pac-12. Funnily enough, this isn't intentional. Let me put the game up first. That would actually help. Oh my! Hang on. Before I put this up, Garth, this is literally the best bowl game of the lot so far, and it's not even close. We have the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl, sponsored by Stifle, featuring the seven.
I think they need to put a limit on like how many people or businesses can be named.
We have the oh my god. We have the 7-5.
Stifle a company, is Stifle a person? Is Stifle Jimmy Kimmel's pen pal name? What is this?
I don't know. I was just surprised when I saw the Jimmy Kimmel part. I'm like, what the hell? That was something I was never expecting to see. But anyway, we have the 7-5 Washington State Cougars going up against the 9-4 Fresno State Bulldogs, who are 3.5-point favorites. Over under a 53.0. Garth, the main playmaker for Washington State on offense is quarterback Cam Ward. No relation to former Carolina Hurricanes goaltender Cam Ward.
Or Hines Ward, for that matter.
Or Hines Ward, absolutely. Former Georgia Bulldog, former classmate of my uncle, by the way. 3,094 yards on the season, 23 touchdowns to 8 picks. Their running back Watson as well had 8 touchdowns, 736 yards. And their leading receiver had 602 yards, 5 touchdowns, and only 51 receptions. So pretty solid ratio there. On their side for Fresno State, their quarterback Jake Haener had 2,600 yards, 18 touchdowns, 3 picks. But the main superstar of the Fresno State offense, guard, running back Jordan Mims, who had almost 1,200 yard rushing and 16 touchdowns. They're also a team that can air it out. Their leading receiver had over 1,000 yards, 80 catches, and 5 touchdowns. Stats-wise, Fresno State did win their conference, obviously, like we mentioned a little bit earlier. They average almost 31 points per game, give up 20 per game. Pretty solid ratio there. All their team stats look pretty decent. 350 yards against on defense per game, almost 400 yards per game on offense. On the other side, obviously, Washington State's a team that completely airs it out. They average 263 yards passing per game, but because the Pac-12, being the weak conference as it is, sorry, Andrew, they give up almost 400 yards of defense against per game. This is a game that I think will be very high scoring, actually. I really like Cam Ward, I will say, for Washington State. I think the guy's an absolute stud. Obviously, air raid offense instituted by, like we said earlier, the GOAT Mike Leach. Rest in peace, my guy. But yeah, I think it's a really close matchup. I think that spread, once again, is pretty fair. So, Garth, I'll let you start with this one. Where's your head at with this game here?
Yeah, this is a tough one to pick because, I think Fresno State's a really good football team for the conference that they're in. Washington State, not really top of the Pac-12, but they're definitely a really competitive team in a much tougher division or conference, rather. So I'm kind of really up in the air on this one. I think one thing that doesn't work in Washington State's favor is that Fresno State, as you mentioned, has a really, really good passing game, really good quarterback, really good group of wide receivers against a defense that is not very good at all. I could definitely see this being a shootout type of game because you've got two great quarterbacks and two teams, that don't play elite defense by any means. I think I'm going to go. I think I'm going to go Washington State in this one just because I trust a Pac-12 team a little bit more in this one of the two.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a close one, but I guess just to be different because, like I said, I think this is kind of a toss-up game. I'll pick Fresno State to win this one, but I would not be surprised at all. Like Mike says here, was Wazoo in a shootout? I definitely could see that. He also says Kansas State over Bama. I don't know about that one, but we'll see what happens there. I think that's a decent matchup as well. Are you even old enough to know what a pen pal is? Yes, we
Actually,
are.
yeah.
Come on, Andrew.
Actually,
We're not 2 years old. We're into our mid-20s at least. We do know stuff like that.
I'm still old enough to have grown up learning and having to write cursive in elementary school.
I still remember stuff like a VCR. I even remember floppy
VCR.
disks, stuff like that. Come on, man.
Disc.
I only mentioned Pac-12 because
Standards.
Andrew, the only one in here, and I know he's a big Pac-12 fan. I've always been a Pac-12 guy. I always feel like I have to defend the conference in recent years, blah, blah, blah. Welcome to the Bold Prediction / Pac-12 The Discussion Show. Nope, it's just the Bold Prediction Show. But anyways, moving on to the next bowl game. This is literally the worst bowl game in history, Garth. We had the Lending Tree Bowl against the mighty 5-7 Rice Owls, going up against Brett Favre's money laundering / embezzlement beneficiaries, the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, at 6-6. -6.5 is the spread. 45.5 the over/under. We're not gonna waste any time on this one, Garth. Southern Miss, I'll pick to win this one. Like, I don't know, 28-24. Literally, no one cares about this game. I doubt even the poor suckers that are fans of both these teams care about this game. The fact that you have a 5-7 team that had a losing record in the Conference USA make a bowl game. I mean, I don't even know what to say. But anyway, Garth, where are you at with this one?
Literally have no idea, no knowledge of either one of these teams outside of knowing that they exist. I think I'm going to lean with Southern Miss solely to the fact that they have a slightly better record. That is my bold take on this one. I'm riding with the team that has a 1-win better record.
I think Garth and I will both go with Southern Miss on that one, and we'll move on to the next game, which we have the New Mexico Bowl. Actually, a normal game, Garth, formerly known as the Gildan New Mexico Bowl. Do not ask me how I know that. I just do. The 7-5 SMU Mustangs, -4 favorites, going up against the also 7-5 BYU Cougars. This is expected to be a high-scoring game with an over/under of an even 64. Stats-wise, 52.5% the match predictor has SMU winning this game. This is two teams, Garth, that are really good at passing the ball offensively. SMU averages 325 yards passing per game, whereas BYU averages 266.6. Both teams can't do defense as well, Garth. Points allowed, SMU almost 35. BYU a flat 30. Points per game scored for both teams, 38 for SMU, 32 for BYU. I honestly think they were very generous on the spread to only have it at, 64? This is potentially a game that could hit at least 70, maybe even more. Neither of these teams can play defense. They're both very high-flying offenses. Where are you at with this one, Garth? This is another really close matchup here.
Yeah, like you said, no, I fully expect this one to be a shootout. Two really good passing offenses. Neither team can play defense if their life depended on it. I've actually, fun fact for the viewers here tonight, I've always kind of had a soft spot for SMU. I really like their mascot. I like their colors. Just one of those teams that's never really like elite by any means, kind of under everybody's radar that I rooted for and played with quite a bit on the older NCAA games that we talked about just a few moments ago. I think that of the two, neither one of these teams' defense is going to win this game. I think it's going to come down to offense, what team takes care of the ball, what team can score more points. And I think I give a slight edge in that department to SMU. So I'm going to go SMU in a one-score game, absolute shootout. Probably like a 38-35, 42-35. So like you said, no, I think that we're going to reach the over on this one, SMU in a close shootout.
All right. Well, once again, because it's a toss-up game, I'm just going to go with BYU to disagree with you because I'm either going to completely fuck up my picks or come back in one singer a week. So there you go. Mike's saying no shade intended, though. It's good seeing Pac-12 rising again, but they failed me. We're going to add Pac-12 to the banned list of words for this chat before the next show. Mike says the Lightning won again. Woo! There you go. And
Fun
the
fact,
Leafs.
Brian Elliott was in goal tonight. Brian Elliott is undefeated on the season in goal for the Tampa Bay Lightning.
And the Leafs lost to the Rangers, who have now won 5 in a row. Andrew saying Ducks 5, Habs 2. Let's go.
Unfortunately, the Ducks are absolutely abysmal this season.
Yeah, no, they're literally like the worst team in the NHL record-wise. But anyway, moving on to the next game, we have the what is this one? Hold on, let me get it up here real quick. Oh, the Frisco Bowl. Finally, another normal name again. Actually, I don't have the full name. It's the Frisco Bowl presented by Serve Pro in all caps.
Hey, that's
whatever
the company
that is.
that Mickey Mouse Bradley works for.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah. Maybe
Awesome.
He'll be there as like a special honorary guest.
Yeah, right. But anyway, we have the North Texas Mean Green at 7-6. So it looks like they made the Conference USA Championship game, going up against the 9-4 Boise State Broncos, who also lost a championship game. A 61.5% chance, the match predictor says, of Boise State winning this game. They are also 10.5-point favorites. The Mean Green are a team that wants to get in the Conference USA. Great offensively, scoring 34 points per game. But guard defensively, 460 yards allowed per game, 31.5 points. This is not something that's going to cut it against a team like Boise State, I think. Boise State's a really balanced offense. They can run the ball great, almost 200 yards rushing per game. Their passing game is serviceable. It's not great. But Green, he's a respectable quarterback at least. He's also a freshman. So we'll see how he develops the next few years. But look, no disrespect to the Mean Green. By the way, one of the best names in all of college football. That's just fantastic. But unfortunately, Garth, I think dare I say, this might be a boat racing. I think Boise State could win this game something like 38-21.
Yeah, great name there in the Mean Green. Unfortunately, I don't think they'll be very mean or very green in this one. I think that Boise State is the much more well-rounded team. As we talked about earlier in the broadcast, they did go to their conference championship game, albeit they did lose, but very good season for them this year. And it's just one of those teams that, quite frankly, usually tends fairly well in bowl season. We've seen a lot of crazy things from them, like when they knocked off, who was it? Arkansas, when they were ranked back in the day. They had a really solid roster. So I think that Boise State gets this one done. And like you said, no, it'll probably be a pretty, I wouldn't say like a blowout, complete beatdown, but I think they'll win convincingly, probably control time of possession, stuff like that all the way throughout, and probably win by like 2 scores.
Andrew says, nice try on the wordplay, 2.5 stars. I don't even know what he's referring to at this point because we're 70 minutes into the show. But there you go. Anyway, moving on to the next bowl game. Garth and I both going to Boise State there. We have the Myrtle Beach Bowl against between the Marshall Thundering Herd and the Yukon Huskies. Marshall went 8-4 this year. Yukon 6-6, which isn't bad considering the past few years. Man, they have just been horrendous. The matchup predictor has a 79.8% chance of Marshall winning this game. Definitely the most one-sided we've seen. And look, Garth, I do not have a bad feeling about this game when I go to UConn's team stats and their quarterback literally doesn't even have a pitcher on ESPN. Kind of gives me an idea of where I'm leaning in this game. -10 favorites are the Marshall Thundering Herd. Look, I mean, UConn's a team. They give up 26 points per game. They only score 20 per game. I'm amazed they honestly went 6-6 with how little talent they have on their roster. And Marshall is a team, another team in the Conference US, or excuse me, they're in the Sun Belt now. Actually, they moved a few years ago, but they did go 8-4. Respectable team. I mean, they've had some great players over the years. Obviously, Randy Moss is one. I remember they had a quarterback named Rakeem Cato, who was an absolute animal. They've had some good players over the years. And I'm going to pick them to win this game, Garth, because I just don't think UConn is very good. I don't think they're even as good as that 6-6 record says. What are you thinking here for this one, Garth?
Yeah, actually, very similar thoughts to you. Noah. I'm quite frankly surprised that UConn is even 6-6. I think they're better than they've been in years past, but by no means are a really good football team. On the other side of things, I think that Marshall, especially for the conference that they play in, is a very tough competitive team. I do believe, was it them or was it Tulane that upset Notre Dame in the beginning of the season? I think it was Marshall, if memory serves me correctly.
You're right. Yeah, it was Marshall. I remember that.
Yep, in
Yeah.
like week 1 or week 2. So I just think that they're out of the two, they're the much better football team on paper. The records are very deceiving there, especially in the sake of UConn. I think Marshall probably wins this one pretty handedly.
Couple more comments coming in. First of all, from Andrew, Garth's mean green comment apparently was the one that got 2.5 stars. So there you go. Myrtle Beach is a very nice place if you haven't been. I have not, Mike, but
I have
maybe I
not
will
been,
one
but
day.
I've always been told that it's a nice place.
Our buddy Hank saying, "How's it going, guys? How about those Rangers? How's it going, Hank? Big
Yep,
win
thank
for
you
you
for the
guys for
win
sure."
tonight. Helps out by lightning by knocking the Leaves down a game.
Yeah, no, the Leafs have been red hot lately. So, really good result for the Rangers. And the Lightning, they're on their heels as well. That top three in the Atlantic, man, looking really good. But if you do want more hockey talk, Tuesday nights on Review and Preview Pucking Around is our hockey show. So, just plug that in there shamelessly. Mike saying Chad Pennington. Chad Pennington's another great Marshall alum. Absolutely. Although Nick D does not like Chad Pennington, just like he doesn't like having good picks in the quick picks competition. Andrew saying UConn mostly plays really bad independent teams.
Yeah.
Agreed. UConn won 4 games in 3 years before this year. That's what I'm saying, Mike. Hey, credit them for going 6-6 because they were absolutely horrendous the past few years. But I think Marshall will definitely take it to them. Next game, Garth, we have the this is a good one, the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. The 8-4 Eastern Michigan Eagles going up against the 7-4 San Jose Spartans. One of their games did get postponed indefinitely, and they never played it. So it looks like they're just never going to play it at all. San Jose State in the matchup predictor 66.5% chance of winning this game. They're also 3.5-point favorites, over under 54.5. Eastern Michigan, high scoring team. They score 29 points per game. They also give up 29 points per game, Garth. Very even on both sides of the ball. Whereas San Jose State scores 27.5 per game and gives up only 20 points per game and 332 yards per game. I think this is another game that's pretty close. I think the spread, once again, I think the spreads have been at least pretty fair for the most part. This is another game I could see being decided by like a field goal or a touchdown. But I don't really have a lot of knowledge in either of these teams, unfortunately, because let's be honest, they don't play in great conferences. But I'm going to pick San Jose State in this one, Garth. I don't know, just gut feeling, I guess. I've always kind of had a soft spot for the Spartans over there, so I'll go ahead and pick them. Where are you leaning in this one?
Yeah, this is one where honestly I don't really know a whole lot about either one of these teams. I think I'm going to go with San Jose here, Noah, just because of the two. I feel like they play in the much better conference. So, in theory, they should be a tougher opponent out of the two. Maybe it's a really close game, though. And my biggest question mark for this one, other than who does win the game, is does the winner of this bowl receive like free potatoes for life?
I have no idea. I actually don't know, but that would be a pretty great incentive. Yeah, I can definitely see that. San Jose State does play in the Midwest Conference. They were second in their division, so that's solid. And Eastern Michigan definitely doesn't play in a conference that good. Of course, Andrew has to put in a little shot. San Diego State boat race San Jose, by the way. I'm glad they were able to boat race somebody this year at least. Coin flip, I have no clue about either. Yeah, that's how a lot of these early bowl games go. But you know what? Got to show respect to these teams for making bowl games. We're going to predict every single one if we can. No matter how boring people might think the matchups are or how little we know about each team. But we only got a couple here to go. We're definitely flying through this at this point. We got 3 more to go before we wrap it up for the night here. The next one is the roofclaim.com Boca Raton Bowl between the solid 8-4 Liberty Flames and the Toledo Rockets, who actually won their conference guard. They beat Ohio in the championship game to move to 8-5. They're 5-point favorites. The match predictors basically dead even. 50.1% say they think Liberty will win this game. It's 54 over under. I think Toledo has a little bit of an edge offensively, but realistically, this is another game that I think is very even. I'll just go ahead and go with Toledo because they've been pretty solid this year. They did win their conference. Liberty, I'm not sure what to think about them because they're tough to predict. I mean, last year they were great. Obviously, Malik Willis was tearing it up, but they're also an independent. Looking at their schedule this year, they played one really good team, I'd say, and it was Wake Forest, and they did only lose by one. Credit to them. But other than that, I mean, Akron, Old Dominion, UMass, Gardner Webb. I mean, it's just not a great schedule at all. Whereas, Toledo at least did win their conference. So I'll go ahead and pick Toledo in this one, in the close one.
Yeah, I'm actually going to agree on this one, Noah, because like you said, Liberty played pretty much a bunch of nobodies this year. And on top of that, they have, I don't know, he could be coaching in this game, but they are losing their head coach, Mr. Hugh Freeze, this offseason. So, that could definitely be an impact. It really has, kind of a emotional impact on the players, on the locker room, especially if he isn't going to be coaching in the bowl game. But yeah, I like Toledo in this one. I just think that they've played a tougher schedule. They were conference champions. I just give a slight edge to them. Should be a good game, though. I think Liberty will play them tough. It'll probably be a one-score game.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think it's another close matchup. And hey, one thing we got to say about all these bowl games, most of them look like they're going to be pretty good games on paper. Andrew's saying Mountain West, not Midwest. Well, I'm sorry, Andrew. I'm 88 minutes into the show. So if I do make a minor mistake, my apologies. I'll make sure to send you a written apology letter in the mail as part of your Secret Santa. Mike saying let him know. Mike instigating as usual because that's just the type of troll he is.
Yep, he needs a pot for Christmas to stir.
Yeah, absolutely. Next, we have the R+L Carriers New Orleans Bowl between.
I actually know these people. Fun fact: this is the first, other than Serve Pro, only for the fact that Mikey works for them. If he didn't, I wouldn't have a clue in the world. But R&L is actually a shipping company that deals with freight. And the reason I know this is because they deliver a lot of bigger items like engines and transmissions to the dealership that I work at.
Nice. That's pretty cool, actually. But yeah, the good old R&L Carriers, they're sponsoring this New Orleans Bowl between the 8-5 Western Kentucky Hilltoppers and the 10-2 South Alabama Jaguars. 58.7% of Western Kentucky win from the matchup predictor. But South Alabama guard, they're actually 4.5-point favorites in this one, over under of 56. Western Kentucky's a team that scores almost 36 points per game, almost 500 yards of offense per game. That said, they almost give up 400 yards per game on defense. South Alabama are a team that average well over 400 yards per game of offense as well, 32 points per game. They were first in the Sun Belt Western Division, I believe it is. And their defense was actually pretty good in the Sun Belt. That said, it's always tough to evaluate Sun Belt teams because it's one of the weaker conferences out there. Not really sure why I'm leaning on this one, Garth. I think this is another one of those kind of coin flip games. Where's your head at with this one?
Yep. So I'll start off by saying I know absolutely nothing about the South Alabama Jaguars, but I do know a decent bit of the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. If you know the alma mater of NFL quarterback Bailey Zapp, as well as the guy who took over the reins there in Austin Reed, a Florida native who went out there to play college ball, absolute stud. He was one of the hottest commodities in the transfer portal. He did remove himself from it and is playing in this game. He's had an absolutely phenomenal season. And for that reason, I'm going to lean slightly towards the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. I got a lot of faith in their offense, and in particular, the quarterback running the show for them. I think they can get it done. It should be a really good game, though, Noah, because like you mentioned, South Alabama has a great defense, statistically speaking, and a 10-2 record. You know, when you're not going up against like a powerhouse football program, is nothing to shake your head at. So I think it'll be Western Kentucky, but definitely in a close one.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that one, Garth. It'll definitely be close. But yeah, Reed this year, Garth, almost 4,300 yards passing, 36 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, airing it out over 500 pass attempts as well on that Western Kentucky team. So, both going with Western Kentucky there. And now the final um, game of this first edition of Bowl Mania, Garth. We had the Lockheed Martin Armed Forces Bowl between the 6-6 Bears. Who had a very disappointing season. You picked them to win their conference. Obviously, that did not happen. But they are 5.5 point favorites, over the 9-3 Air Force Falcons. 48.5 is the over under. Couple interesting notes on this game, Garth. Baylor is a team that averages almost 34 points per game offensively, but obviously they're a Big 12 team, so their defense is terrible, almost giving up 27 points per game. Air Force, on the other hand, once again in a much weaker. Actually, I think they're an independent, aren't they? No, they're in the Mountain West now. I remember that now. There you go, Andrew. The Mountain West
There you
Conference. They
go.
were second in their division. Went 9-3, almost averaged 28 points per game. This is an interesting matchup, Guard. The Air Force is definitely a team that loves to pound the rock. I mean, my God, 331 yards rushing per game. They barely passed the ball at all. They had a 1,600-yard rusher who scored 15 touchdowns. Their leading receiver only had 384 yards receiving. On the other side, one of Baylor's best players is definitely running back Richard Reese, who is a freshman, had almost 1,000 yards in his first year and 14 rushing touchdowns. Really good player. But, yeah, this is a close one, Garth, but I'm probably going to lean for Baylor just because I think Air Force's offense is one-dimensional. If you can slow down their running attack, they're not going to pass the ball at all. So just because they're so one-dimensional, I don't think Baylor's been great this year by any means. I think they've been very disappointing. But this is a team they're playing that, hey, fair play to them. They went 9-3. But if you can at least slow down their running attack, you really neutralize their offense.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting Air Force football team. Really good season for them. They went on the road, beat UCF without completing a single pass, rushed the ball like 50 times. But you know, to your point, Noah, also Andrew's comment here, the Air Force is physical, but I don't think they quite match up to Baylor. That's kind of exactly my thought process in this one. And like you said, very one-dimensional team. Obviously, they live and die by the run game. Baylor's going to know that going into this game. You know, I don't see how you don't just load up the box and just sell out to stop the run, make them have to show that they can pass. And I just think that even though Baylor's only 6-6, by no means a good year, this is still a Big 12 program that's had some really good seasons the past few years. You know, I just think that they've got those big physical guys on the defensive side in the trenches in the front seven that can really slow down this Air Force rushing game. And I think that Baylor's going to be able to win this game.
Yeah, I agree. I think Baylor will just have a little bit too much, like you said. Aren't they both in the same conference? I think he was talking about the Western Kentucky one. No, Western Kentucky's in the Conference USA now, and South Alabama's in the Sun Belt, I believe it is. If not, they definitely used to be. Mike saying, side note, Brock Purdy start 11 for 11 tonight. Great, he's on my bench for Danny Dimes. So hopefully that works out for me. I decided to give Danny Dimes a spot start because I didn't know how healthy Brock Purdy would be, but looks like he's doing pretty good so far, at least. So that's good to see. I used to loosely follow the Sun Belt. Andrew says my youngest brother graduated from ULM. Air Force, yeah, you already went over that one. No, I definitely agree on that one. I think Air Force might keep it close. But like you said, I think if they can at least slow down, because you're not going to completely stop it, right? Like, I get it, a team averages 331 rushing yards per game. You're not going to completely neutralize it. But if you need to slow it down to a respectable number, like even if they only get 150 rushing yards, but they don't need do anything passing wise. I mean, 200 yards offense or whatever, that's not going to cut it against a team like Baylor. So definitely agree. I think Baylor will edge it out. But that's going to do it for our first episode, first week of Bowl Mania, Garth. And interesting, we did 13 games, and I believe we disagreed on 4 of them. So, there is some room for you to either extend your lead or for me to catch up in this one. But that's going to do it for our first week of predictions. But before we get off, Garth, one last question. Are there too many bowls in college football? I checked this year, Garth. There are 42 FBS bowls, which means you have 84 teams that make bowl games. There are 131 teams in FBS. This ratio comes out to 64% of teams in college football will make a postseason bowl game. One of those teams, as we mentioned earlier in Rice, had a losing 5-7 record. So, I'll throw the floor to you on this one, Garth. What do you think about the amount of bowl games? Do you not mind it? Do you think it should be lowered a bit to make bowl games more meaningful?
Yeah, so firstly, I did not realize until you just gave that stat that is how many teams made it. 80, what is it, 82 or 81?
It was 84.
84 out of 132 FBS teams. That's a very good chunk. I think one, expanded playoffs will definitely help, but two, I do think that they should probably lower that, especially because, for a lot of schools, bowl games don't really mean as much anymore as they used to. A lot of bowl games players are opting out nowadays to go to the NFL. I don't think that they need to like drastically cut it back by any means, but maybe if they went from 82 to say like 60, like 30 total teams, 60 total teams, but 30 total games, maybe something along those lines. I definitely have to think about it, look at it a lot more now that I just know that stat that it's 84. But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to, narrowing it down a little bit.
Yeah, look, I think I don't want to talk down too much because, like I said earlier in the show, want to give respect to all these teams, even if it's for a few seconds. At least give them the honor of recognizing the bowl game, giving them an official prediction and whatnot. Like you said, look, when 2/3 of teams in college football can make a postseason game, I mean, look, there are people that say the NHL or the NBA, when around half the teams make the playoffs, that's too much. That it should be cut down. Uh, you know, People complain when the NFL expanded to only 14 out of 32 teams making the playoffs. But when 64% of your teams, you can go 500 and make a bowl game. You can even go 5-7 like Rice did. And if you're lucky enough, you can still make a bowl game. I don't know, man. I don't think that. I think they could definitely cut down a bit. I mean, some of these bowl games, you've quite respectfully, as respectfully as possible, you never heard of in your life. I mean, I definitely think they could cut it down, even if it was just like, say, 30 bowl games. Still plenty of bowl games, 60 teams. It's a little less than half, but that's still a good chunk of teams, Garth.
Here,
And if there
so
are less, go ahead.
So here's a good point too that I just thought of now. If you were to cut the bowl games by a little bit and not have so many total, it also increases the viewership because you're going to be able to make a lot more games be on either prime time wise, night games, or even if it's not a prime time spot, at least be on like a major network channel. So I think that would also be a benefit.
Yeah, definitely better viewership. I think there'd be more money for each bowl if there were less bowl games. Some of these lower bowl games, I'm sure they still make all right, but I mean, if there were less bowls, there's more money to spread around to less people. Um, and Andrew says it here. You can either lower the amount of bowls on that basis, or you could raise bowl eligibility from 6 wins to 7 wins. I definitely agree that could lower it a bit as well. Mike saying, personally, I have no problem with how many bowls there are. It gives these kids and programs experiences they would never otherwise get. But I do think you should be at least 6-6. And I get that. That's like I said, earlier, you don't want to disrespect these teams. You know, making a bowl should mean something. I completely understand what Mike is saying there. And look, bowls, unless it's a playoff game or a championship game, is it really going to have major implications on the season? No. So, I understand that point as well. Cutting it down won't really change the season that much overall. You do want these guys to go out and have fun. That's what these bowls are about, Garth. Obviously the game is important. People want to win. But, traveling over the country, like the Hawaii Bowl or whatever, like that's an awesome experience if you're a friggin' 19-year-old college student go to Hawaii for a bowl game, football game. That's incredible. I completely understand what Mike is saying there. I just think, once again, 64% of teams, I think is a little bit too high. Is it something that keeps me up at night or something that I'm pissed off about that I wish would change? No, I just think it's something that could be changed. But if it doesn't, I mean, it is what it is. I'm not going to go throwing a dying duck fit about it. That's kind of where I stand on it. Mike says, I also wouldn't be opposed to 7-5 being the minimum to qualify. I'd agree with that. And let's be real, the reason we have so many is due to sponsorships. I mean, my God, you saw some of the names we listed off, 2 or 3 sponsorships in one name. Absolutely, that's what it's all about. It's all about making money. But the question is, if you had less bowls, like Garth said, could you get more viewership? Could you get better contracts for the TV licenses or what have you? Could you get more sponsors, better sponsors, if you just focused on fewer bowls? That's the debate to be had for another time. But regardless, this is how it is for now. And as long as it's like this, Garth, we're going to keep predicting pretty much every single bowl game we can. So that's going to do it for the first week of Bowl Mania. We covered 13 bowls. We'll be back next week. I went ahead and did the count. Next week we should be doing 15 bowls. They're kind of around the same level. There's not really any major ones that I saw, but there's a couple of pretty solid matchups, and most of the games do look pretty close once again. So, real quick before you get off, I did just have one question for you, Garth. How are you with bowl season? Do you try and watch basically every game you can? And if something's on, do you just kind of put it on the background? Or do you just kind of watch, your team and the most major matchups?
So obviously, I definitely watch the college football playoffs, the semifinals and the finals. I would say that I maybe not every single one, but a good bit of the bigger like New Year Six bowl games as they're coined, and then everything else. It's kind of just like, obviously my team I'll watch, and then either if there's a team that I like slightly root for, like I was talking about earlier in the show, SMU, I'll definitely be tuning into that one. Maybe like a college from back home gets a bowl game, which there isn't any this year, unfortunately. But, just maybe throw it on in the background while I'm doing something around the house. Maybe not like sit down and watch super intently, but at least have on the TV, catch, bits and pieces of it for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty much the same way. Definitely watch all the major bowls. Obviously, CFP is a must, but the New Year's Six bowls, other solid matchups, like if there's 2 ranked teams, I'll definitely try to watch from start and finish. Other than that, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. We do a college football show. I'd love to watch every single bowl start to finish. There's just not enough time. There's so many of them on so many random days. Typically, what I do is if there's a bowl on and I'm not doing anything, I'll put it on the background or whatever. But, it's just, there's so many of them. Like I said, there's 42 FBS bowls. There's also an FCS bowl for 43 total. It's just really hard to watch so many of those 3-hour football games. Bowl season's fantastic. It's a great atmosphere, like Mike said earlier. It's great for these kids. It's great for fans. I love it. I've always loved it. Even if, some could argue there's too many, it's definitely a fantastic time to be a college football fan. So really looking forward to bowl season once again. Andrew saying packed New Year's 6 games, packed teams, San Diego State, Army, LSU, and Hawaii. If they make it, I have a soft spot for them. Andrew supports about 10% of college football, it looks like, so he has some decent teams to root for. Regardless, that's going to do it for this absolutely loaded week 1 show of Bowl Mania. We'll be back next weekend with more predictions. Before we do sign off, Garth, do you have just any last-minute thoughts and comments before we wrap it up for tonight?
Yeah, just a huge thank you to everybody that tuned in tonight. Blew up the comment section. I think that we set the all-time Sweet Tea record for most Pac-12 related comments, most time spent talking about
Shattered that.
Pac-12. And other than that, we'll be on next week before Christmas. So I'll leave my Christmas spiel for that show. I hope everybody enjoys their weekend, gets to watch some of these bowl games, sit down, get your favorite snacks out, just enjoy some college football. A lot of teams that we don't get to see play, throughout the course of the regular season because they're not really, televised, or at least they're on some like obscure network that you probably don't have. So sit down, enjoy that. And again, just a huge thank you to everybody that tuned in tonight.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And until next time, we'll be back next Tuesday, the 22nd, like Garth said, with more bowl predictions. But until then, this has been another episode of the Sweet Tea Show on the Sports Box. We'll be back very soon. But until then, from myself, Noah Dog Dobler, and my co-host and good buddy, Garth Charger Patrick, can't wait to see Florida get annihilated by the Beavers buzzsaw in that game. But until then, enjoy your sports, enjoy your life, and have a good one. Take it easy.
Thank you for watching this episode of Sweet Tea on the Sports Box. Please remember to follow us on all of our social media outlets. On Facebook at Sportsbox Show, Twitter at Sportsbox Show, Instagram at The Sportsbox Show. Find us on YouTube and join Outside the Box, our Facebook sports discussion group. The Sports Box is brought to you by our sponsor, Showcase Sports in Hamilton. Showcase Sports for the elite athlete. And also our friends over at CrowdPlay. Download the free CrowdPlay app today and use promo code THEBOX at sign up for 10 free points. Thank you for joining us.